Well, good morning. Good to see everybody today. Thanks for coming. If we haven't met yet, my name is Adam, and I'm one of the pastors here. And we're continuing our series today, Light in the Tunnel. And I love the concept behind this. The principle is light doesn't just come at the end of the tunnel. Jesus died so we could have light in the tunnel. I'd like to take 100% credit for that, but I can take zero credit for that. I think Kyle pointed out that truth, that we don't, the saying, there's light at the end of the tunnel. Well, you know what? I need some light while I'm in the tunnel. Well, Jesus Christ, we can walk in the light of Jesus Christ, even when the tunnel surrounds us. And so I love this. I love this. This is if you're visiting today, or maybe you just haven't been with us for a while, in this series, we're looking at some various just mental health issues. And so I want to ask you a random question as we start today. What are the lions in your life right now? I'm sure that's crystal clear, so let's move on. Okay, we are going to move on actually, but I think as we move along, that will become a little more clear what I'm asking. But I just want to plant that little seed in your head as we begin. What are the lions in your life right now? So the issue that we're talking about today is fear, as you may have guessed from Kyle's words and from the songs that we've been singing. We're talking about fear. Now, when you think about fear, we need to specify what kind of fear we're looking at today, because there's all kinds of fear. For example, show of hands, how many are afraid of spiders? Raise your hand. Yeah, most of you. I was convinced that when I got to seminary, I was going to find out that if you go back to the original Hebrew, it was a spider that tempted Eve to sin, not a snake, because those little suckers are so evil, right? But I was wrong. It actually says serpent. Okay, how many of you are afraid? How many are afraid of snakes? Speaking of snakes, all right. A lot of you, okay. Heights? Anybody? Heights? Public speaking? Some of you, I feel like, are raising your hand to everything, you poor little soul. How about raising your hand in front of a group of people? Anybody afraid of that? Okay, a couple of people raise your hand to that. Thank you for conquering your fear. All right, so there's those kinds of fears, right? But there's also healthy kinds of fears. For example, the fear of getting hit by a truck, if that motivates you to look both ways before crossing the street, that's a good fear, right? The fear of getting burned that causes you to be careful around a hot stove. So those kinds of fears are actually helpful. They help protect us. But then we also have the fear of God, right? The Bible talks about the fear of God. And when it talks about that, it's talking about having an awe and a reverence for God. Because while, yes, He is the one who sticks closer than a brother. Yes, He is the one we can have a close personal relationship with. Yes, He is a friend. But we can't forget, He's also the God of all creation, the holy God of all creation, who speaks galaxies into existence. And that is the fear and the awe of God. So that's a kind of fear. But then finally, the fourth kind of fear, there's a paralyzing fear, isn't there? Here we're talking about fears that keep us from making choices we need to make, or taking steps that we need to take. Maybe the fear of failure, or the fear of being wrong, or the fear of taking risks. Maybe it's the fear of people not liking you. Some people are so afraid of not being liked that they don't make the choices that they need to make in life. This one's deep. How about the fear of people knowing the real you? How about just the fear over what's going on in the world around us? Some people make all kinds of choices motivated out of nothing more than fear as they look at all the headlines. So that's the kind of fear that we're talking about today. Fear that keeps us from making the choices we need to make, or causes us to make choices we shouldn't make, or keeps us from taking steps that we need to take. That's the kind of fear we're talking about today. And we're going to start in Daniel chapter 6. Now, if you know Daniel's story, maybe my random question at the beginning is starting to take a little shape. But let me give you a little background here. God's people had been taken into captivity in Babylon. Daniel was one of those exiles, but he kind of worked his way into favor with the king, and he was actually an official in this pagan government. He kind of worked his way up into that position, and the king loved Daniel. Well, the other officials, the other Babylonian officials became jealous of this, and so we read this. In verses 4 and 5 of Daniel 6, it says, "Then the other administrators and the high officers began searching for some fault in the way Daniel was handling government affairs, but they couldn't find anything to criticize. Daniel did his job so well, they couldn't find anything related to his job that they could criticize. He was faithful. He was always responsible. He was completely trustworthy." Listen, if you want to be a good witness in the godless world that we live in, that's a pretty good place to start. Do your job well. Be faithful. Be responsible. Be trustworthy. And they concluded our only chance of finding grounds for accusing Daniel will be in connection with the rules of his religion. So these officials, these jealous officials, they put their heads together, they come up with a plan, they go to the king, and they say, "We're all in agreement." I'm glad we pastors never hear that, aren't you, Kyle? Everybody thinks, okay, Gertrude, you mean you, your husband, and your cousin Martha who lives in New Jersey. That's everybody, all right? They say everybody is in agreement. Well, they're already starting off stretching the truth because Daniel wasn't in on that. So it's not everybody, but they say we're all in agreement. All of us administrators, us officials, high officers, advisors, governors, we're all in agreement that the king should make a law that will be strictly enforced. Give orders that for the next 30 days, any person who prays to anyone, divine or human, except to you, your majesty, will be thrown into the den of lions. Wow. Now remember, the king loved Daniel, and he knew Daniel was a Hebrew who faithfully worshiped God. He knew this, but in that moment of pride and self-glorification, he wasn't thinking of Daniel. See, that kind of pride tends to blind us to the well-being of others. And so the king agrees to this. Yeah, I love this. Let's do it. I mean, what pagan king wouldn't like that? Nobody in the land can pray to anybody but me for 30 days. I love it. And he signs this into law or whatever he had to do to make this a law. And what does Daniel do? He ignores the decree. Of course he ignores the decree. Nothing's going to stop him from praying to God. He will pray to God no matter the cost. He's going to faithfully worship God no matter the cost. And so after witnessing Daniel praying to God, his enemies say, "I'm telling." That's a loose translation. But they go tattle to the king. "We saw Daniel praying." The king realizes that he's been played, and his friend Daniel is now in a heap of trouble because even the king can't undo what the king has decreed. At last, the king gave orders for Daniel. He wrestled all day. How can I keep this from happening? But at last, he gave orders for Daniel to be arrested, thrown into the den of lions. The king said to him, "May your God, whom you serve so faithfully, rescue you." And a stone was brought, placed over the mouth of the den. The king sealed the stone with his own royal seal and the seals of his nobles so that no one could rescue Daniel. Now, I got to, as I was preparing for this message, I turned to that great theological commentary called Google. And I Googled frightening facts about lions, okay? Hopefully nobody has a fear of lions. If you do, close your eyes and your ears for a minute, all right? Because I want to tell you a few things that I found out about lions. First thing, lions can jump up to 36 feet. Now, I stepped it off. That's a little less than the distance from the edge of the stage almost to the back wall. like behind the sound booth. That's a 500-pound animal that can jump that far. That's amazing, the power that these animals have. Their claws and their canine teeth, that's the long, sharp ones in the front. Their claws and their canine teeth can be 3 inches long. That's about the size of a human finger. So if you look at your finger, that's how long just their claws are and their canine teeth that hang down in front of their mouth. They can open their jaws up to a foot, which is larger than a human head. A lion can literally bite your head off. All right, my wife bit my head off last night. That's not what I'm not talking about that. I mean, literally bite your head off. What do they do with those big 3-inch teeth and big giant jaws? Well, they eat about 18 pounds of meat a day. That's like eating 70 hamburgers every single day. Amen. Amen. That's what got amen today. All right, and this one's kind of disturbing. All right, parental guidance suggested on this one. This is the last one. The lion has a special tongue that is rough enough to peel away the skin of their prey. Yeah, you're not hungry now, are you? Still want all those hamburgers? If a lion licked the back of a human's hand just a few times, it would peel away much of the skin. Oh my word! Like, these are ferocious animals. And I'm sharing these with you not to ruin your lunch. I'm sharing these. I want us to feel the predicament that Daniel was in. He's in some kind of dungeon or cage. It's not real clear, but he's trapped with a bunch of lions with 3-inch fangs and 3-inch claws that can jump 36 feet and literally bite his head off and literally lick him to death. And there's no rescue. He is trapped. You can't convince me that Daniel felt no fear. Now, so we're going to see in a minute. It says that Daniel trusted God. But folks, faith doesn't always mean an absence of fear. Sometimes it means trusting God in spite of the fear. Sometimes it means taking steps in spite of the fear. And if you wait until the fear is all gone or the source of the fear is all gone, you're never going to do anything. Sometimes trusting God means having faith even in spite of the fear. So let me ask you again, what are the lions in your life right now? What are the lions in your life right now? Well, here's how David's story turns out. Or Daniel. I knew I was going to do that. Very early the next morning, the king got up and he hurried out to the lion's den. When he got there, he called out in anguish, "Daniel, servant of the living God, was your God whom you serve so faithfully able to rescue you from the lions?" If this was a TV show, there'd be a long dramatic pause right now. Okay, feel enough tension? All right. Then the triumphant music breaks in, and Daniel answered, "Long live the king! My God sent his angel to shut the lions' mouths so that they would not hurt me, for I have been found innocent in his sight. And I have not wronged you, your majesty." I love how he throws that in. I haven't wronged you, by the way. I really haven't done anything to you, by the way. But the king was overjoyed, and he ordered that Daniel be lifted from the den. Not a scratch was found on him, for he had trusted in his God. Daniel trusted in God. Now, there have been occasions over the years where I've been asked, or somebody would say, "Pastor, I want to trust God, I just don't know how. How do I trust God?" Now, I'm not going to give you some easy, 3-point formula for trusting God. The truth is, I think trusting God is supposed to be difficult to some degree. Because it's with wrestling with it that we actually learn to trust him more deeply. And through wrestling with trusting him that we actually draw closer into his heart. So I'm not going to give you some 3 easy steps to trusting God. But I am going to give you one thing that I believe is at the very foundation of trusting God in the midst of fear. In my mind, everything. I mean, we could talk about, some mental things that you can do in your head, and those all have their place. But at the heart of dealing with fear, there's one thing that is the very foundation of that, and it is remembering who God is. Everything else, when it comes to handling fear, is built on that one thing. Remember who God is. I love it in Exodus chapter 3 when God meets with Moses at the burning bush, and he's telling Moses to go back to Egypt to lead his people out of slavery, and Moses offers this slew of excuses. And every time Moses offers excuses, God doesn't give him a pep talk. There's no, you can do it, Moses. There's no, believe in yourself, Moses. There's no, conquer your fear, Moses. No, every time. You know how God answers him? He reminds Moses of who he is. God reminds Moses of who God is. So the foundation for overcoming fear, it's not found by looking deep within ourselves or just digging deep or even conquering the thing that's bringing us fear. No, the foundation is found in who God is. So to illustrate who God is as it pertains to our fears, I want to talk here briefly about Jesus, a man named David, and another lion. So let's start with Jesus. That's always a good place to start, right? In John chapter 10, Jesus is using sheep and shepherds to teach his disciples, and he says, I'm the good shepherd. The good shepherd sacrifices his life for the sheep. A hired hand will run when he sees a wolf coming. He will abandon the sheep because they don't belong to him, and he isn't their shepherd. And so the wolf attacks them and scatters the flock, and the hired hand runs away because he's working only for the money, and he doesn't really care about the sheep. Now, Jesus isn't really talking about shepherds and sheep. He's using them as a metaphor. And the principle behind the metaphor is that shepherds aren't just gentle sheep whisperers. No, shepherds, true shepherds, good shepherds, as Jesus calls himself, are fierce warriors who will stop at nothing to protect their sheep. Good shepherds are fierce warriors who will stop at nothing to rescue and protect their sheep. And in this metaphor, Jesus also teaches us that the reason a good shepherd will fight for his sheep so fiercely is because they belong to him and he cares for them. They belong to him and he cares for them. So with that in mind, let's move to David. We'll get back to this. But in 1 Samuel 17, Israel is at war with the Philistines. They're in this standoff, and there's this Philistine giant named Goliath, and he's talking all kinds of trash to the Israelite army. And we're talking about paralyzing fear today. The whole Israelite army was paralyzed with fear. Nobody would do anything. Nobody would step up and fight this guy. And so David, who was a shepherd, he was sent by his dad to take some grain and some bread and some cheese to the front lines and bring back a report of what was happening. Grain, bread, and cheese. I was listening to another pastor preach on this story not too long ago, and he kind of pointed out David was taking charcuterie to the army. Now, my brother got married a month or so ago, and I did the ceremony, and at the rehearsal on Friday night, his now wife asked me after the ceremony if I would announce to everybody that we're having barbecue, because every good Texas wedding ends in barbecue. We're having barbecue, but while the family's taking pictures, there's a table over there with some charcuterie that they can help themselves to. And I looked at my brother and I said, I feel like charcuterie is one of those words no self-respecting man should ever use in casual conversation. And my brother looked at me and said, nah. So I said there was a table full of snacks, is what I ended up saying. So David takes his snacks to the front lines. He sees the army cowering in fear before this giant. And he goes to the king and he says, I'll fight this dude. And the king says, you can't fight this dude. You're just a boy. I don't know what the Hebrew word is for dude, but that's what I hear in my head, right? You can't fight this dude. You're just a kid. And here's what David says. He says, your servant has been keeping his father's sheep. When a lion or a bear came and carried off a sheep from the flock, I went after it. I struck it, and I rescued the sheep from its mouth. And when it turned on me, I seized it by its hair, I struck it, and I killed it. Remember the 3-inch fangs and the 3-inch claws and all the power. Your servant has killed both the lion and the bear. This uncircumcised Philistine will be like one of them because he has defied the armies of the living God. And the Lord who rescued me from the paw of the lion with the 3-inch claws and the paw of the bear will rescue me from the hand of this Philistine. Now, I know we've got some tough dudes in this room and some tough dudes watching online. And, maybe you've got grease under your fingernails and you've got heads on your wall, and you would never be caught dead using the word charcuterie in casual conversation. But I am confident, I say this with about 100% confidence, that nobody in this room and nobody watching online has ever killed a lion with your bare hands. David had. David was a shepherd, and he was a fierce warrior who would stop at nothing to protect his sheep. What did Jesus teach us in John 10? That's what a shepherd does. That's what a good shepherd does. Because his sheep belong to him and he cares for them. So you have David, a shepherd who shows himself to be a fierce warrior who will stop at nothing to protect his sheep. Now imagine David out in the pasture somewhere. Sheep are quietly grazing. The sun is warming his skin. Sound of a gentle stream down in the valley soothes his soul. And he takes out his laptop or his parchment paper or whatever they wrote on. Are you with me? Are you with me in this pasture? The sheep, the lush green grass, the warm sunshine, the gentle stream. David writes this: the Lord is my shepherd. I shall not want. He makes me to lie down in green pastures. He leads me beside the still waters. He restores my soul. He leads me in the paths of righteousness for his name's sake. Yea, though I walk through the valley of the shadow of death, I will fear no evil. For you are with me. Your rod and your staff, they comfort me. David, a good shepherd who would stop at nothing to protect the sheep that he cared about and that belonged to him, says, the Lord is my shepherd. Which brings us back to Jesus' metaphor in John 10, where he says, I am the good shepherd. I am the good shepherd. Folks, if you are a follower of Jesus, he is your shepherd. That's who he is. And he will stop. In fact, he has stopped at nothing to rescue you. When you're afraid, set your gaze on that. He is your shepherd. The prescription for fear is not focusing on ourselves or the source of the fear. It's not about digging deep. It is focusing on who God is. He is the good shepherd. He is our shepherd, and he is a fierce warrior who stops at nothing to rescue us. That's who he is. So let me ask you again, what are the lions in your life right now? What are the things causing you fear? What are the things making you anxious? What are the things stressing you out? What are the things keeping you up at night? What are the lions in your life? Is it the future? When you're afraid of the future, remember who God is. Is it your kids and their well-being? I don't blame you. But guess what? He's their shepherd too. Remember who he is. Is it getting old? Is it dying? You're afraid of losing someone you love. Remember who God is. Are you afraid of the test results that you're waiting on or that a loved one is waiting on? Would you remember who God is? He is the great physician. Is the thing keeping you up at night or stressing you out or the thing causing knots in your stomach, is it the headlines of today? Can we please, folks in the church, when we look around at the headlines and we look around at what's going on in the world today, can we remember who God is? He is the God who finishes what he starts. He is the God who wins in the end. He is the God who's in control even when it seems like he's not. He is the God who is bringing history to its final conclusion where Jesus triumphantly returns and he calls his people dead and alive to come spend eternity with him. Remember who God is. We are not a people of fear, folks. That's not because we're so big and powerful and smart. It's because of who God is. He is why we don't walk in fear. Remember who God is. Best I can tell, I'm no psychologist, but best I can tell, when I think about fear, I feel like fear comes from three different things. Either a lack of sight, a lack of knowledge, or a lack of control. Right? When we can't see, why are kids afraid of the dark? Because you can't see. Why do we fear the future? Can't see it. Lack of sight or lack of knowledge. We're afraid of things we don't know about. Right? When we brought our firstborn son home, on the day we brought him home from the hospital, and I'm pretty sure he was still in his car seat. I was standing in the living room, I was looking at him, and this fear came over me, and I thought, where's the manual? The hospital didn't send the manual. I have no idea what I'm doing here. Fear from lack of knowledge. Maybe you start a new job or start a new chapter in life, and there's a little bit of fear that accompanies that because you don't know. You don't know what to expect. But lack of control. How about when that baby grows up and turns 16 and now doesn't need you in the car to drive with? Or graduates from high school and leaves home? You have no more control. That's a scary thing. That's a scary thing. So as you think about the lion or lions in your life right now, the things that you are prone to fear, whatever it is, ask yourself, what's the source of that fear? Is it because of something I can't see, something I don't know, or something I can't control? And when you identify that, then remind yourself of this. God sees, God knows, God's in control. God sees, God knows, God's in control. That's why we trust him even in the presence of fear. We don't have to see, we don't have to know, we don't have to be in control because God's got it all covered. What we can't see, he sees. What we don't know, he knows. And what we can't control, he's got it. And he's got you. And no matter how scary things in this world get, folks, if you are a follower of Jesus, he's got us. He's got us. He's got it. So as the band comes up, let's just acknowledge whatever the lion or lions are in your life right now, yeah, they're big and scary. Let's don't minimize it. The headlines, they're scary. Kids leaving your house, that's scary. Bringing a kid home for the first time, that's scary. The future, all of it, yes, it's scary. But God is your shepherd. And he is a fierce warrior who will stop at nothing to protect you, to rescue you. And you know why? Because you belong to him. And he cares for you. He cares for you more than you do. He cares for you more than your mama does. My mama's sitting right here. My mama cares deeply for me, but you know who cares for me more than my own mama? God. He cares for you. When you're afraid, focus on who he is. So I want to have an altar call today, and Kyle did this a couple Sundays ago. I think he does this with the teens. If you come up this morning, if you'd like somebody to pray with you, why don't you come to this side. If you just want to pray by yourself, come to this side. And by the way, you don't have to be a pastor to pray with somebody. If you see somebody praying here and you feel compelled to pray with them, then come pray with them. But here's what I want to ask today. Again, what are the lions in your life? What are the things that you're prone to fear right now? What I want to ask you to do is come forward today, not to pray about those things. I'm guessing you've already been praying about those things. And I'm not saying stop praying about them. I'm saying, what if right now, for just a couple minutes that we have left, what if instead of praying about that thing, you just zeroed in on who God is? Your shepherd who fights for you. What if you just zeroed in on who God is and all of his majesty and all of his wisdom and all of his greatness? Would you just come focus on that today? Because let me tell you something, when we look at our fears through the lens of who we are, when we look at that lion through the lens of who we are, they're really scary. But when you look at that lion through the lens of who God is, that lion starts to look like a kitten. Because there's no lion that's any match for God. So would you just come forward this morning or stay where you're at? And let's just focus on the greatness of who God is